When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it and will send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing, untying the colt?" They told them that what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. When they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it, many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12.
It was a really exciting day. There were so many people running up and down the streets yelling, "He's coming, he's coming!" And "It's the Messiah, God's anointed one!" And "Hosanna!" They were falling all over themselves and throwing their cloaks into the road and waving their arms and leafy branches if they could find them. I had to fight my way through legs and arms and over baskets and under donkeys just to see what all the fuss was about. I didn't really know what to expect, but I guess I thought it would be like a parade, like the Roman cavalry hosted whenever they came into Jerusalem. You know, big war horses and armor and feathered caps, the whole shebang. Boy, was I surprised. It was just an average-looking bearded guy in typical homemade robes and sandaled feet, riding on the most pathetic excuse for a horse I've ever seen. It might as well have been a donkey, that little colt he was riding on. It looked absolutely ridiculous. And yet, they cheered and yelled a little louder. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," and "Hosanna in the highest." And I started to sing Hosanna too, because he wasn't a Roman soldier, because he wasn't high and mighty, because he was one of us, because he was just like me. Hosanna, someone just like me, was God's chosen one, God's anointed one, the Messiah. How cool is that? I knew right then I was going to follow him.
Mark chapter 14, verses 1 to 8. It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people." While he was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard, and she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was the ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her."
I was supposed to be in bed, but it was such a nice party. Have you ever been to a party? Everyone laughing and talking and joking and eating and laughing some more. Simon, that's my dad, he knew how to throw a party, and we'd been having lots of them since he came home again. You see, my dad had been really sick, and he had to go away from us to keep us safe. And then one day he was home, all better. saying he'd been healed by a man named Jesus. I didn't really care who or how, I just wanted my daddy back. But then Jesus was there, and we were having the biggest party yet. So when my mom sent me to bed, I didn't exactly go. I just snuck under the table in the corner and curled up, watching and letting the sounds of laughter and music lull me to sleep. And I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, I heard yelling, and my mom was kneeling in front of me, a broken, empty jar in her hand. And all I could smell was nard, the same stuff Dad used before things got so bad he had to leave. It was dripping off of Jesus, who was standing with his hand on my mom's head. They were yelling at her that it was a waste, but I reached out and grabbed her hand because I got it. Jesus has healed that, and it was a miracle. We didn't need this stuff anymore, and we never would. What better way to show our trust and our thanks, and maybe pass on a bit of healing too? My mom's eyes met mine, and they were filled with happy tears just like mine. Because the best part? Jesus got it too. He was defending her and saying thank you too. That's when I knew he was everything everyone was saying. The Messiah, imagine, in my kitchen. I knew right then I was going to follow him.
On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I might eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So the disciples set out and went to the city and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he came with the 12, and when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be distressed, and to say to him one after another, "Surely not I." He said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup. After giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God."
I've been a servant in the home of this rich guy in Jerusalem for like a year, but this was going to be my first Passover celebration. I didn't have a clue what to expect, but I definitely wasn't expecting us to rent the upper room for free to some dude and his disciples. But who am I to question the boss? I'll tell you, no one. That's who. So I just got to work making sure everything was just so. The guys who came ahead of the gang to help me knew what they were doing anyway. I was just there to tell them where we kept the bowls and wine and linen and stuff, and maybe make sure they didn't steal anything. They didn't exactly look above that kind of thing. I'm just saying, and when the Jesus dude they were getting things ready for arrived, he wasn't what I was expecting either. He was like washing their feet for one. A few of his disciples tried to resist that move, so I know I wasn't the only one who thought that was a little weird. But the craziest thing happened when they were eating. Jesus was like, "Listen, one of you guys is going to betray me. I've been watching people my whole life. It's what made me good at my job. Reading what people might need and getting it to them before they even ask for it. So I had a pretty good idea it was the one they called Judas, who was guilty. But the crazy part was, I think Jesus knew that too. But he was eating with him, still passing the bread and sharing the cup. With some guy who's going to betray him? Who does that? If someone as shady as Judas was still accepted as a follower of Jesus, still given a chance, it kind of got me thinking that maybe even someone like me could follow Jesus. And by the time the meal was over, I knew I was going to be his follower too.
Mark chapter 14, verses 32 to 52. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I'm deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake for 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit needed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as thought I were a bandit? Day after day I was you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled." All of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran off naked.
I don't want this getting back to my mom. She doesn't know anything about my secret nightlife. You see, I like to sneak out after dark and wander around the neighborhood. I've been doing it ever since my 13th birthday. You see, ever since then, when my official childhood ended, every second of every minute of every hour of every day of my life is accounted for. Not a moment to myself. So I started stealing some time just for me after lights out. I'd sneak out my window, climb down the trellis, and slide under the cover of the nearby bushes. And then I'd find what there was to find. And what I found was the Garden of Gethsemane. I loved sitting under the olive trees as the breeze moaned softly throughout their branches. So that's where I was that Passover evening when Jesus and his followers showed up. I'd seen him before at the temple, so I knew right away who he was. And when he went to sit quietly under an olive tree nearby, I could tell he was struggling with something. The way he prayed, it reminded me of how desperate I felt sometimes, how weak and lonely, how afraid. I watched and prayed with him, which I think was a good thing because he was pretty upset when he saw his own disciples had fallen asleep. He needed someone watching over him. It might as well be me. I was standing up to go to his side when the soldiers came, and it all happened so fast. He didn't resist them, and I think I was in awe of him even more after that, but I couldn't afford to get caught. My mom would kill me. So I ran, just like everyone else, except I think I was the only one who had his linen nightdress ripped off him. Don't even ask how I explained that to my mom, or how I told her that I was going to follow Jesus.
Mark chapter 14, verse 53 to 72. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.'
But even on this point, their testimonies did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." The guards also took him over and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also are with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And he went out into the forecourt. Then the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. Then, after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are Galilean." But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept.
I was a servant girl in the court of the high priest who made Peter cry. I didn't mean to. I really didn't. I wasn't trying to get him in trouble either, although lots of people think I was. It was just that I was so excited to see him there. I mean, I knew he was one of Jesus' followers because I'd been keeping track of them. You see, the high priest was so nervous that what Jesus was doing was going to be unwanted attention to us from the Roman government. But I thought what Jesus and his followers were trying to do was cool. I wasn't really supposed to have my own opinion. Trust me, I knew that. But I couldn't help myself. They were standing up for us, and I heard they even welcomed little children to come to them and ate with tax collectors. So yeah, when I saw Peter warming himself by the fire, I couldn't stop staring. I think my mouth even dropped open. Was it really him? Would he try to defend Jesus or break him out of there? I had to know. I tried to ask him quietly, and when he denied it, I was kind of shocked. I was so sure it was him that I turned to the people around me. He's one of them, right? Am I losing it here? Isn't he one of Jesus' followers? They were nodding, but he was still denying it. But the murmurs spread, he was really starting to freak out then, swearing that he didn't know Jesus. I wish I hadn't said anything then. After all, if he was found out, he could end up under arrest too. Then where would we be? But when the rooster announced the dawn breaking and Peter started to cry, I wanted to cry myself. What was going to happen now? Would there be anyone left for me to follow when all this was over?
As it was morning, the chief priest held a meeting with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priest accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you. But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now, at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now, a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murders during the uprising. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them, according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priest had handed him over. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him.
The excitement in the air that day had a totally different feel to it than just a week earlier, when I had dodged through legs to try to get a look at the Anointed One, our Messiah. I wished I wasn't caught up in the crowd this time. It was angry and frantic, and I didn't like it. I wanted to run the other way, but there were just so many people. They had their fists raised in the air, and they were yelling, "Crucify him." I didn't understand what was happening, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to see Jesus, so I let the crowd carry me forward until I could see him there, and immediately wished I hadn't. He'd been flogged. If you don't know what that is, you don't want to, because it is terrible. He was bleeding and bruised, and they were still mocking him, that purple robe and crown of thorns. I don't know how he was feeling, but I'm guessing scared and hurt and even angry. I know I would be. But he didn't say anything or even resist, and I thought he looked more powerful than that moment. They wouldn't break him. Nothing they could ever do to him would break his spirit. He wasn't going to change who he was or what he thought, no matter what. It made me love him even more. Mother and father thought his death might quash a rebellion and keep us all safe. I wondered if he thought that too. Was he protecting us all, even now as they led him to be crucified? I only hoped one day I can be as loving as him if I keep following.